This is the story of a dictator who got away with it. An authoritarian regime that could repress its own citizens, steal from its own citizens, never ever go into any form of democratic way of consulting with its citizens and getting away with it. Because from Russia in the north to the Asian trading partners in the east to the west, nobody's really criticizing this dictatorship.
Uzbekistan is, even in the post-Soviet space, it is the outstanding example of a kleptocracy. That is, a government where one family runs the country and runs the country for its own benefit and its own bank account.
I'd been in the country for 2 weeks, I think, when the Uzbek government was advertising to Western missions that they had captured an Al-Qaeda cell and were having a trial. So I went to the trial to look. And as I was there, one of the witnesses, who was an old man, giving evidence, said he wished to retract his evidence. He'd given evidence against 2 of the accused, who were his nephews. But he said the evidence had been extracted from him under torture. And in fact, that they tortured his children in front of him until he had signed the statement. And as he gave that evidence, by chance, I was situated in the courtroom within touching distance of him. And it just struck me as true. You know, often you can tell, not entirely in a logical way, you can just feel when somebody's telling the truth or not. And it just came across as very truthful. And it made me start to question what was happening. Once it became known to people in Tashkent that I was questioning what was happening, people started coming to me with evidence. You know, torture victims themselves came, people with photographs showing torture injuries, letters smuggled out of jails, and we started to compile information. We then had, a couple of months later, Theo van Boven's visit from the UN, and we worked very carefully with him and helped him, in fact, to circumvent some of the official obstructions that were placed in the way of his visit, and helped him to meet torture victims. So that was the way we went about gathering information. But you know, it then became plain to me that the most severe physical torture was affecting hundreds of people a year in Uzbekistan. The scale of it was staggering.
Whenever someone is accused of an offense, whether it is an economic offense, political offense, or just a common criminal offense, the regular procedure is that someone is put under heavy pressure or under torture to sign already a statement, and that statement is then used as evidence. Well, this is done, as far as I could find out in listening to all these victims and witnesses. This is done as a part of the procedures, you see.
You know, this was just people, I think they took from the street the young men and accused them and beat them, and they obliged to agree what, because under torture they agreed to everything just to stop the torture. I spent nearly half of my 4 years in isolation units, and I saw all the injustice, and I saw all regime's repression in that place. And this is darkest place in the society, darkest.
The cotton industry in Uzbekistan remains by far the largest chunk of Uzbekistan's exports, Uzbekistan's hard currency earnings. And it's only traded through the state trading companies. The farms get a tiny percentage of the income, either state farms or private farms, mostly state farms. The percentage of the income that reaches them is tiny. The percentage that reaches the labourers who pick the cotton and toil in the fields doing back-breaking work is even smaller. The cotton makes huge profits, which go to finance the regime in terms of the state apparatus, but also which go into the Karimov family, the regime families, through their positions in the state trading companies and through backhanders and corruption. The work of picking cotton is awful. Cotton plants are actually quite spiny. You have to pick a quota of kilos per day. And cotton fibre, if you can imagine, for those who haven't handled it, if you can imagine taking a ball of cotton wool and fluffing it right out until it's as fine as you can get. That's what the stuff is like. You get it in small bits off the plant, it cuts your fingers. And to pick 9 kilos of it a day, as some children have to, is just an extraordinary amount of physical effort. And it's conducted in a terrible climate. Uzbekistan has an extreme continental climate. At the start of the season, they can be, and I've seen it, small children, 7, 8 years old, can be picking cotton in 40 degrees centigrade in the baking sun with no shade and no clean water to drink. The only water they have to drink is the muddy water from the irrigation ditch. By the end of the season, a few months later, it can be winter. I have seen children pick cotton in the snow. So just how bad this is something which people don't really always grasp.
I think it's very, very clear that that Germany has invested a lot in its relationship with Uzbekistan. The investments have been focused on the security sector, and they've been focused specifically on Luftwaffenstützpunkt 3, which is this special military installation near Termez, which has played a huge role with NATO logistics and operations in Afghanistan. It's also a specifically German-Uzbek relationship, not a NATO relationship. And one of the major questions is, why is that so? Why is it specifically German? And the answer to that question may very well be on the Uzbek side, that the Uzbeks feel that they've developed a good rapport with Germany. And also, I think that they feel that Germany is prepared to evade sanctions when they're imposed by the European Union and potentially even by their NATO partners. So I think there are definitely some very troubling elements in this relationship.
I'm inclined to think that these steps of accommodation, appeasement, if you may call it, that they are not conducive to the human rights in the country, particularly, although the Uzbek authorities claim differently, but in particular since you know from all kinds of sources that the real situation of human rights and the question of torture and so on is not under control, has not improved. So I'm rather critical of the stand of the European Union, and let us face it that as Uzbekistan, Germany played a sort of leading role to accommodate for strategic economic reasons as well.
If you asked me to rank genuinely what I believe the British, American and German government's interests are in Uzbekistan, I would say interest number 1 is military support in Afghanistan. Interest number 2 is economic interest, potential oil and gas and trading links. And interest number 3, a long way below the others, is anything to do with human rights, good governance, or what happens to the ordinary Uzbek people. I think it's extremely unfortunate that the Karimov regime views the West as weak, that the West won't maintain positions. The West said, we're going to put on sanctions until you do certain things in response to Sanjar, like let in an international investigation. None of those things were done, and the West then lifted the sanctions. And the Karimov regime, is a brutal regime, and a regime in which might is right, and just, am I stronger than you? And now Karimov thinks he is stronger than the West.
The European Union did, in the wake of the massacre that occurred in Sanjar, impose restrictions on its members' dealings with Uzbekistan, and the restrictions were focused specifically on the state security sector, that is, the very people who have been involved in the crackdown and massacre. And Germany, I think, clearly violated those restrictions by providing training. Not only did it provide military training, it provided them to some of the same forces that had been involved in the Sanjar crackdown. So effectively, Germany made a farce of the European Union sanctions regime.
I think it's curious to see that countries who are the main market for the cotton of Uzbekistan, who are actually transferring tens of millions of euros to military bases, to access to the airports, to use the facilities of Uzbekistan. These countries who are giving all of this money and doing all of these purchases feel that they are the weak part, and the dictatorship that are receiving all of this money are in the strong position. Of course, they are misinterpreting their bargaining power. If they told Uzbekistan enough is enough, I think they could put pressure on this government. If there is one thing we've learned from the Arab Spring, it is the following: it is never, ever a good idea to go to bed with a dictatorship. It will come back to haunt you later.